Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yep, I'm Kate from Pupil. Thanks for having me.
And Kate, how would you describe the music of Pupil Slicer?
Uh, that's a hard one. I think our main sort of stylistic influence is mathcore, and then there's a bit of sort of black gaze, shoegaze, and post rock in there.
Okay. And so when you say mathcore, what do you mean? Are you talking about the time signatures? Is there like a lot of discordance? Do you feel like your music is
Yeah,
particularly
but
fast?
yeah, all of that.
Okay.
Weird time signatures, weird discords, and blast beats at 220 BPM.
Cool. And as far as the other stuff that you mentioned, the black gaze and the post rock, would that be referring to the more atmospheric parts of the songs?
Yeah, I think we take a lot of influence from bands like Death Heaven and Cult Vuna and Godspeed You, Black Emperor, in the sort of more low key parts, and like Deftones as well.
Okay. Uh, if you wouldn't mind, could you tell us a little bit about the history of Pupil Slicer and how the band came together?
Yeah, we started in about 2016, 2017. Me and our drummer were in another post black metal band, and me and the bassist from that band wrote some sort of grindcore riffs that didn't really fit. Then we ended up writing a whole EP over a weekend, sort of mucking about, and then we needed a drummer, so we got the same drummer in. Uh, and then shortly after that, the other guy I was writing with left, but we'd started getting a couple gigs because we had a funny band name. So me and the drummer were like, well, we can do anything we want with this. We can play whatever music we want. So we were like, well, we both really like mathcore, so let's go more in that direction. And then we tried to bring in some more of the sort of post black metal elements to keep that going because we're both really big fans of that. And then shortly after that, we found our bassist Luke, um, and he's a big prog nerd, so I feel like some of that sort of leads through into it as well. Um, and then we wrote some tunes, and here we are.
So from those early grindcore riffs, you didn't necessarily envision the style that Pupil Slicer evolved into.
I think I wanted it to sort of be like this, but the other guy was a bit more like I want it to sound like Carcass, which is cool. But then when he left, I was like, great, I don't need to sound like Carcass now, because that's fun. But I wanted to write stuff that was a bit crazier, and
Right.
I think I've achieved that.
Okay. And as far as writing songs, does it always start with a riff for you?
um, some of them do. A lot of, I would say, a majority of riffs that I'll put together and then sort of uh, I'll bring those into practice space with our drummer and we'll jam out some sections. Then I'll go home and I'll record it on my phone and then assemble it into a song. But there are a couple which have been cool drum ideas first, and then writing guitars around the drum ideas. Um, and then there's like one song on the new album which was I wrote a bass part first and then wrote around that bass part.
It sounds like all the songs start with you.
Yeah, for the most part, I'm like the chief creative songwriter. And on the first album, I wrote most of the drums and the bass as well. But on this album, I try. Now that we've been together a bit longer, it's a bit easier to sort of give just a raw riff to the others, and then they'll get what I mean by it. Because at the start, I was sort of figuring out exactly what I wanted to do with that, and so I was a lot more prescribed about how I wanted things to sound. Whereas on this album, there was a bit more room because we sort of understood what we were going for a bit more. I could just give them the others a riff and then see what came back. And like 9 times out of 10, I was happy with what because they understood my vision for it. So it was fun to have a bit more sort of back and forth on the other parts on this album.
And how complete are the songs when the rest of the band hears them? Are you giving them mostly arranged songs, or are you giving them just a collection of riffs and you guys arrange them together? Do you program
They're
drums?
mostly arranged. Yeah, I'll program drums if I've got an idea for a section, um, and write bass if I've got an idea. But if I haven't got an idea for it, I'll sort of see what they've got. Um, and then if there's certain things I'm not gelling with, I'll have a go and sort of try and write a guide part which is closer to what I was going for with the feel of a riff, and then the others can take that guide part and sort of make it their own.
Gotcha. And so basically, uh, when you're saying if you're not happy with the section, uh, not happy with the arrangement that you yourself came up with, right? Not necessarily what the other members are doing.
Well, either or. If like a part comes back and it's not like a bass section's not hitting the right tonality, because sometimes if it's just a guitar on its own, it's hard to hear what the tonality is, and in my head that's more fully formed than what I'm sending to the others. um, so they might be hearing sort of different root notes on different chords and stuff, so I'll just put in some guide stuff to help with that. But yeah, there are lots of times I hold myself to the same standard where I've just like got this one part I'm sitting on for a year because I'm like, I just can't make it work until I figure out a way um, to actually like turn it into a song instead of just some disjointed riffs.
From the first or second album, is there a song um, that went through a large number of revisions in the process that you're describing? Like you weren't happy with
Um,
what was coming back and you kept rewriting it?
Dim Morning Light on the new album, that took quite a lot of passes to get to a place where I was happy with it. And Song at Creation's End didn't go through a lot of revisions, but it took a long time to come together because it was a lot of individual parts that I was trying to make work together, and finding a way to structure that was quite hard because it's like a 8 minute song, and it's quite hard to structure that in a way that doesn't get boring.
Right. And what would you say the key is to making an 8 minute song that isn't boring?
Uh, I think the structure is really important and the flow of everything. But also, I think a good songwriting technique is just make sure you're happy with each individual part of the song and happy with, like, if you think the riffs are good, every riff on its own needs to be like a cool riff. You can't have like a bridge that's like, oh yeah, this is just filler to get you to this point. Like, I think you need equal amounts of care on like your verses and your choruses and your bridges and everything really.
So let's talk about the new album. It's called Blossom, and it was released on the 2nd of June through Prosthetic Records. Uh, Tell me a little bit about the album and what your intention.
So I think you cut off for a second. Got up
Sorry, did
to
I just cut out? Can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you now.
Sorry, did you hear that question? Do you want me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Just tell me about the new album, and tell me what your intentions were going into it.
So the new album ended up. It wasn't at first a concept album, but it ended up as one. Um, I wanted to have a stronger cohesion to the album on this one, and sort of approach it writing it as an album as opposed to the first album, which was sort of songs written at different points in time put together. Um, this one was like everything's being written specifically for this album over time. um, and I think we just wanted to push ourselves and not rely as heavily on trying to write sections that sounded like other bands. Um, like obviously the influences still come through because no art's created in a vacuum, but it was having the confidence to sort of write whatever we thought sounded good and then use it, as opposed to being like, well, that doesn't fit Pupil sizes, so we'll throw it away. Um, it was more because a lot of the feedback we had on the first album was people saying they really enjoyed the parts where we weren't just trying to sound like someone else, and just doing our own thing. So there was a bit more of that, and like my ethos was like, if I think it sounds cool, then it sounds cool. I don't need to be like, I wonder if anyone else will think this sounds cool. So we're sort of writing it for ourselves more as well. Just making music that we really like, and if we like it, hopefully other people do as well. Um, and
I'm
yeah, we
curious
wanted
though,
to dial.
sorry,
Uh,
as somebody who, was listening to Converge like 20 years ago and Dillinger around the same time, or Meshuggah, or, maybe some of the other influences that you had. How do you know when a riff it sounds like Pupil Slicer and when a riff sounds like one of the bands that you cite as an influence?
um, I don't think it's an issue if it does sound like one of the influences, because that's going to happen. But it's less actively being like, and now I want to write a Converge riff, which we sort of were doing on the first album, being like, now we want to do a Dillinger bit and then a Converge bit.
Okay.
And I think the aim was to sort of amplify everything. Like instead of having, if we're gonna delve into a bit of shoegaze and post rock, we might as well fully commit and sort of come to full fruition on what we could do with that, instead of sort of just hinting at it and moving on. There was a lot of the first album's a lot more sporadic and sort of has shorter songs and songs that are just lists of riffs, because I was really worried if I played a riff twice, people would get bored. Or and I didn't think I was really worried no one would think any of the riffs are good. So if I just keep playing new riffs, no one can get bored. Whereas this album, there was a little bit more confidence to be like, oh, that is a decent riff, let's play it twice.
Gotcha. Uh, would it be fair to say that the big difference between Mirrors and Blossom is the shoegaze and post rock elements are more prominent on this latest album?
Yeah, I suppose that's a big difference, but I don't think we've toned down the. We sort of made the mathcore parts a little bit more crazy to like compensate in the other direction. Like we wanted, if you just like that side of us, then we've got that in spades, as well as also diversifying. But it wasn't really writing a song. It wasn't just being like, oh, let's do a song that sounds different to the rest, just for the sake of it. It was like, oh, we've got these cool riffs. This is like a song's worth of stuff. We might as well use this as a song. Whereas before it would have been, that's cool, but it doesn't really fit the band. Whereas on this album, we were a bit more like, if we've written it and we think it sounds cool, then it is the band because we've written it.
Yeah. And I should point out that in addition to the shoegaze and black gaze post rock kind of stuff, there's also uh, like trip hop kind of beats on there. It seems like you
Yeah.
guys are really consciously expanding the sound of the band.
Yeah, I wanted to have more electronic elements in the first album, but it was hard to find space for it, and I also didn't know how to do that. Whereas on this album, I was like, right, I want to add in these elements, and I wanted to do it on the first album. Let me get some synth programs up and start messing around and seeing what I can do, and download sample libraries and all sorts of stuff to try and See, because there's stuff I would hear in my head, and then I'd be like, I don't know how to do that. And then I was like, right, well, if I don't know how to do it, I've got to learn how to do it. So, um, yeah, it was just sort of being. There wasn't any. There's a lot of being like, oh, I don't want to come back to this, and I don't want to be like, oh, that's fine, and then leave it, and then come back to it and be like, oh, I should have done this. Or I want an album that I'll be totally happy with at the end. Because you can't change it once it's out there, so you might as well put in the effort before you record it.
Sure. I mean, in terms of uh, using the samples and coming up with the beats, can you tell me what the process of learning how to do that was? Like, did you just have to sit down with the software and figure it out?
Yeah, basically, I was just teaching myself uh, how to use plugins and MIDI programming and stuff like that, and then just seeing what I could make work in what places. Um, and then I would say about 70% of that I did before we went to the studio, and then like 30% was at the studio, and our producer had a really good ear for it, and that was a lot more of the subtle stuff like auxiliary percussion and little background synths like soaring over pieces over parts in the songs. Um, so like little ticking noises over a riff, or like um, just little pieces that you wouldn't really notice in the mix, but if you took them out, you would notice they weren't there because they're just elevating the sections.
Gotcha. I do want to speak more about Louis Johns and his contributions to this album. Uh, Before we get to the recording, do you want to speak a little bit about the concept?
Yeah, so I went for a when I started writing the lyrics. I started with I think Song at Creation's End was the first one I had parts for, and then I had a couple sort of phrases here and there I'd written um, when they came to me leading up to it, and then when I finished writing Song at Creation's End, I was like, well, and that was drawing influence from Final Fantasy 14 Endwalker and Outworld's Echoes of the Eye. I sort of was writing a song about those, and then I was like, well, I could just
Explain to this old man. Did you just list a couple of computer games?
yes, those are computer games.
Okay, sorry,
That's right.
Grandpa's not up on the gaming, not since Mario. Okay, go on.
Yeah, so I was writing about those, and then I finished writing it. I was like, oh, there's more. There's still more stuff I could write about that's really cool from those. And then I sort of expanded it and was like bringing in stuff from Event Horizon and Sunshine, which films, and then the book I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, games like Silent Hill, um, sort of a bit of influence from Downward Spiral by Nine Inch Nails, and because that's my favorite concept album, so I was like, I want to have a flow like that to the album. So that was sort of what I was trying to capture, and then once I had like an end and a beginning, it was a lot, and a middle, it was a lot easier to be like, right, well, start forming this world. What's happening here? What needs to happen to get from this point to this point? Um, and then I just started writing around, and the songs were relatively fully formed at that point as well. So then I could write around the riffs and like key changes and sections changing in the songs to sort of have the lyrics match the feelings of the songs at the same time.
Do you want to tell me what the concept is, or is this something that you want to keep under
Oh
wraps?
yeah, sorry. It's like a uh, science fiction, cosmic horror, space opera, uh, sort of about a character that hears an alien signal that awakens something within them, and then they go on like a sort of kaleidoscopic journey through different planes of existence, and it's got a lot of themes of like despair and what hell is, and and death and misery. But it's a big story, so I recommend people. I don't want to go too explicit with it. I think it's fun if people read the lyrics and listen to the music and sort of form their own take on it in a sort of David Lynch way, where it's like I don't want to spell things out entirely, but all the pieces are there, and then people can form their own interpretations of the
Sure.
story.
Sure. Uh, I've spoken to a few bands over the years who've written concept albums. I'm very curious about the process of fleshing something like this out. Um, do you start with an outline? I spoke to one band who actually almost wrote like a screenplay for their album before they started writing lyrics. What was your process?
It was. It wasn't. I sort of had the general concept in mind, being based on those two games, and then started fleshing it out in the lyrics, and then the sort of it was sort of a case of the story was coming to me and coming together in pieces as I was writing, because there's still a bit of sort of writing words that sound good over the music, and then saying, well, what does this mean, and then turning that into finding how that fits as a piece in the puzzle of the grand overarching story. Um, there wasn't like a screenplay or a full brief, but I sort of knew what I want the story to be, and then was writing to that um, to sort of meet that goal.
Gotcha. For your previous album, you actually did a number of videos. Are you planning on doing videos for this album? And will they be, I guess, more along the lines of what the concept is, tie into the concept of the album?
Yeah, we've done 3 music videos for this album, and we tried to capture. It's quite hard with something so high concept to capture that with a budget in a music video. So we
You
tried
can't
to
call Danny
sort of
Boyle?
take. No, unfortunately not. That would be sick though. Um, no, we tried to sort of capture the feelings of the songs and vague plot points for each of them throughout, but the videos aren't one to one, but it's like an accompanying piece of media to the album that has elements tied to the album and sort of might help a little bit with understanding it.
Let's talk about the recording of the album. Can you tell me where you ended up going?
Yeah, we went with Lewis Johns at the Ranch in Southampton, and he's produced the last 3 Roller albums, every Employed Serve album, the last Ithaca album, uh, and quite a few others.
And was that the reason why you decided to work with him?
Yeah, it just seemed like he was an option we knew of from those, and then he was really responsive and helpful. So we didn't need to look for long because we were like we'd be in safe hands with him. And then we did a single with him to sort of try out being in the studio, and that was fun. For Thermal Runaway last February. Um, so we sort of had that experience, and then we were sort of prepared a bit more for the full studio experience, being there for 4 weeks.
And in addition to the engineering and the mixing of the album, Lewis Johns also contributed some of the synth elements that you talked about, right? Like some of the strings and the
Yeah,
sequencing. Can you tell me a little
yeah,
bit
some
about
of the
that?
auxiliary. Yeah, that was. We left a bit of time at the end of the recording, like 4 days, just to go through all the songs, go through all my synth ideas I had before, and then sort of uh, see what we can add, what needs stuff to elevate things. Uh, like vocal harmonies as well, but also I'd be like, I want some strings under this part, but I'm not really sure what to write, and then I went away to get like some lunch and came back and he'd written like this whole string arrangement at the end of the song. I was like, that's it. So yeah, he was really invaluable in like helping realize the scope of the album. And he was
Okay.
always up for like any suggestions and stuff, which was cool. We'd like give everything a go.
What would you say he brought to the sound of People Slicer? Or I guess what were you looking to him to bring to the sound of People Slicer?
Um, I think we wanted this album to be quite sleek and well polished, and I think he's quite good at doing that. It's quite different to the tone we went over in the first album, which was a lot more raw and I suppose hardcore punky in the production and stuff. But I feel like for the concept of this, it fit to have a bit more of a slick production. Uh, and yeah, just making sure you can hear all the elements and stuff and nothing's getting lost. Um, that was the main
Sure.
thing, and like serving each of the songs in the best way possible.
Sure. Uh, sorry, I glossed over this, but is this the first album with your guitarist Frank Muir?
Yeah. Uh, no, Frank played. Yeah, it's the first album. We Frank played on Thermal Runaway, and then on this album, he was an additional person. I'd like send the ideas through, and he'd come back with a bit of feedback for stuff. And then he wrote like 3 or 4 lead parts on the album as well, where I was like, "Can I have a bit of shredding here? Because I can't really shred." And then he'd be like, "Yeah, sure," and then write some shredding. That was a nice addition. Having someone else to pass ideas through. He's since left the band because he's had a baby, little baby Frank, mini Frank. So we've got Alex Brown playing guitar with us now at live shows.
How do you know Alex?
Alex is in the band Infected Dead, which is like a technical death metal band that Luke's also in, our bassist.
Okay, gotcha. Uh, tell me about the guy who mastered the album, Grant Berry.
Grant, we didn't really interact with Grant much. Grant is a master that Lewis really likes, and he's had really good results with. And he can. Lewis said that like Grant can master stuff a lot better and get stuff sounding louder than he can. So he was an easy choice. So it's sort of just like all the interactions were just Lewis sending stuff through to Grant, and we didn't really. But it all came back sounding fantastic, so we didn't really need to do much back and forth.
And at the time we're having this conversation, you finished up some touring and you just played Donington. Is that right?
Yeah, we did like 3 to 4 weeks with Boris, Japanese, fantastic Japanese band, and they were really nice. And that was our first Europe tour. And then we came back. We did one show in London, and then played Donington Download Festival to like 8,000 people, and that was pretty sick. There was like circle pits from the first note until the last one, including between the songs, which was weird but really cool. And then we played Mystic Festival in Poland, which was really cool. Got to meet Meshuggah there, which was cool.
That's awesome. Do you like playing these big fests?
Yeah, there's a lot of fun playing the big festivals just because you get to play to a lot of people who've never heard you before, and it's sort of a good barometer of like, is the music any good if people who've never heard you are going to enjoy it or not? But it seemed like a lot of people enjoyed it, which is good.
So the second Pupil Slicer album is called Blossom, and it's out now through Prosthetic Records. Kate, tell everyone how they can order the album. What's the best way to get it?
You can go to pupilsizer.com, and then there's a link through to our Bandcamp and our big cartel, which has merch and some UK distro records from us directly, which is a good way to support us because we do all those orders ourselves. And then I think we've got some stuff on Evil Greed, some CDs and vinyl on Evil Greed for shipping from Europe. So if you're in Europe, that's the best way for that. And then I think Night Shift merch has some US distro merch. If you're ever in the US.
Cool. Do you want to say anything about the physical releases that Prosthetic is doing for this album?
Yeah, we've got vinyl CD. We've got some tapes. So that's all of the formats you can get it in. No laser discs, unfortunately.
Are they doing colored vinyl or anything like that?
Yeah, we've got. I think the first pressing is almost sold out. It's sold out on our end, on our big cartel, the ones we had. I think there's a couple coloured first pressings available on Bandcamp, and then we're on to the second pressing now. So we've got a limited band variant of 100 on our big cartel, which is like a cool orange and yellow, sort of spinny design. Yeah, we've got all sorts of colours.
Cool. And you mentioned pupilslicer.com. How else can people follow the band online if they want to keep up to date with tour dates and things like that?
Yeah, all the tour dates are on viewprecisely.com, but you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all of those are just Pupil Slicer. No one else has taken that name, which is good.
Was that a hard name to come up with?
No, I just thought it was funny. It just sort of came to me, and I was like, "Wow, that's a stupid name for a band." So then we had to use it because it was so stupid.
I mean, the best names usually are, right? Like nobody tells the Beatles that they have a stupid
Yeah,
name because they're the Beatles
yeah, exactly. Or diabetes.
or Dying Fetus, right? Exactly. Is there anything else you want to say?
Um, I thank you. If you check out the album, hope you enjoy it. Don't know why you'd be listening to us if you haven't heard the album, but or
You're one of my
if you're a
followers.
fan of this podcast, if you're one of Adrian's followers, then yeah, please check it out. Hope you enjoy it, and also try and listen to the whole album in full because it's like more of an album than a songs album.
Right. You want people to experience it from beginning to end.
Yeah, I think that it works best in that context.
Cool. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you for having me.